And it came to pass at the 7 years' end that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha hath done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that, behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. When the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, Restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. With that, as an introduction, we'll ask Brother Nigel to come forward.
Good evening, everyone. Give you a warm welcome in this rather chilly evening. Marty and Kate send their apologies. They're still not feeling very well, but they said they were going to be watching in, so hopefully they can hear and enjoy what we will be discussing this evening, along with all those others that are watching in. As you know, we've been having a look at some of the miracles that Elisha did in his not really a ministry, but in his responsibility as a prophet. The miracles that he did, we're having a look at those as we go through. Now, there's some interesting characters that we're going to have a look at this evening. We've got Elisha, obviously. We've got the woman. We've got the son. We've got the husband. And we've got Gehazi as well in this story, which we're going to be considering tonight. And one of my questions at the start of my research for this was, what is the purpose of God recording this story for us to read through history and right down till now? What is it that he's recording here for us to learn from? And there's obviously quite a few in Elisha's work that are all recorded for a reason. And they're all very random type of events. There's feeding of a lot of people. There's a raising of the sun. There's making an axe head to float. There's leading armies. There's this wide range of strange things which Elisha does. So what is the lesson that is contained therein? That was probably my first question that I was trying to answer. And I'd have to say, I struggled to come up with a package that covered all of them and said, this is what he's doing. There's a few interesting themes that run through. We'll see that in a minute, that go through these things. But I was still probably somewhat at a loss to know what the whole package of these miracles was all about. And last week we referred to the miracle where he fed a whole lot of people with not very much. And it says specifically that there was going to be some left over, and there was. And we all know about the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000, how exactly that same scenario happened in the life of Christ. So there's echoes of other events in these miracles. And some of them are almost like a parable of those things which happen later on in Christ's life, but others there's not. So trying to find a theme that runs through all of those, I found quite difficult to do. And specifically tonight, I have the Shunammite woman, and trying to think what is the parable involved in this story. I thought long and hard for a long time, and I have not been able to find a parable that encompasses the whole story. But what I've found is the characters within this story and some elements of the events will have echoes of other things which happened through Scripture. Obviously, the promise of a son to a barren woman, the birth of the son, the death, the resurrection, the receiving an inheritance. Well, that's like what happens to Christ. So there's elements in this story which give us echoes of things which happen in other places. But when you try and put together, well, if the son was Christ, who was the mother, things don't sort of like fit in a logical sequence of a parable in the whole story. But the woman herself can teach us a lot of lessons. And I think she represents the saints, and in her faith and in her determination in the things which she does. There's also some strange things which are recorded. You remember when I did the Esther studies, I said there was things in the book of Esther that made me think it shouldn't be recorded like this. It should be written in a different way, or a different language used, or whatever. And in this story, we have some of those same sort of strange language type of things come up again. We have repetitious phrases. The verse 8, the very first verse we talk about, it says, "It fell on a day." It's sort of like, it's like telling a good yarn. It's like someone's telling a nice story, and it fell on a day. And that is repeated through the story. So there's repetitious phrases through this record which seem a little strange. Also, she says, "It will be well," and that is said numerous times through this record. One strange thing is that there's no names. The woman doesn't get a name. The son doesn't get a name. The husband doesn't get a name. The king is not named. So there's no names on any of these people. There's no time frame put as to when it happened. Whereas most records through here, like last week, we had the battle, or I think it was last week, it might have been the week before. Ari, I think, did that. And it was about, this king, and it gave names, and they said what they did. Whereas this record, there's no names at all, which seems a little strange. So when I see something that seems a bit strange, I think, what are we being told? It's more about what happens with this woman than herself. It's about what happens in this story. One other strange thing is she's in chapter 8, she's told to leave her country and go and sojourn somewhere else. And then she comes back and she gets her inheritance. And the king says, restore to her all the produce of the land that when she was missing. It's like she went because there was a famine. Why would she be getting all of the stuff back if she had to leave because there wasn't any? Like, there's strange thing. There's a lesson being taught here. So there's strange things which should stop us and make us think about what this story contains. The things that she didn't want. She didn't want advice, a good word to the king. She didn't want a good word to the captain of the army. She didn't want those things, but it's what she gets in chapter 8. And the thing that she did want, which was a son, she loses. So the things that she didn't want, she gets, and the things that she did want, she loses. So there's some strange ups and downs through this story. One other really strange thing, which I think is teaching us a lesson as well, is Elisha seems very aloof from this woman. He speaks to her nearly always through Gehazi. He calls her to the room. She stands in the door, and he speaks to Gehazi to tell her something. She's standing right there. Like it's really quite a strange picture, which is painted here. And a bit of trivia, when the young boy is raised and he sneezes, I believe it's the only time in the Bible where someone sneezes. So he's famous for being the only sneezer in the Bible. So we have some parables mixed in this book. We have, as I referred to, about the son, about his being promised, him dying, being raised, receiving an inheritance, and we know that can be a shadow of Christ. We have the woman who I think represents the saints, because you'll see her faithfulness and her confidence and her strength in the things which she does. And as I said, what does God want us to take away from this story? It is really a similar thing to which happens in some of the other stories, that God is in control. God is able to do anything he pleases to further his will, to teach people and to develop people. God can do all things. One probably really important part of this is the woman perceives that Elisha is a man of God. She studies what happens, and she's perceptive, and she picks him out as a holy man of God. And we know that that is something that we do with Christ. We read, we study, and we perceive that he is a holy man of God. So the Shunamites' example should teach us some important lessons as we go through this story. Also, interestingly enough, and you'll see why it's sort of relevant, she lives in the town of Shunem. Shunem means a double resting place. A double resting place. So when Elisha ends up laying on top of the boy and to raise him, it's like a double resting place. So the story, the name of the town actually has a relevance to the story which we're going to read. Okay, now Elisha had 16 miracles. I had a quick think through to see what sort of things were relative to those stories. When we have the parting of the river of Jordan, we know the lesson about the turning back of life going from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea and being turned back. It's a similar sort of thing happening there. So if we're talking about echoes of other events and lessons in Scripture. We had the purifying of the water in Jericho, which we know that the pure water is what we need to attain to eternal life. The protection by the prophet by the two she-bears that come out and kill the children really is a lesson that God is in control. It is his job to wreak vengeance when it is required, not ours. We have in the army one, we have God's power over the natural elements, the bringing of water and defeating of those armies. Providing of the widow's oil, where she poured it out and filled up all of those jars and she had plenty of oil, is like an echo to the 5 wise virgins in the New Testament. Tonight's subject is Elisha's annunciation prophecy for the woman of Shunem. Annunciation basically means an announcement about having a child, is usually what that word is associated with. So we have that prophecy, which is a miracle. We also have the resurrection of her son, which we'll have a look at tonight. We have the poison soup. If you have a look in there can be ties with that one to the Last Supper. The multiplication of the loaves with the feeding of the 5,000. The healing of Naaman, washing in Jordan with baptism in the cleansing waters of baptism. Gehazi cursed with a skin disease can be referred to the wages of sin is death, that curse that goes upon him. The miracle of finding the axe, I think Jim's got this coming up, so probably hopefully I don't steal his thunder, or maybe might help him, I don't know. But it is talking about God's power over the natural elements again. God can do whatever he chooses and do whatever he likes to pursue his will and do what he requires. Capturing the band of the soldiers and taking them into the city could well be loving your enemies. They said, should we kill them? And they say, no, feed them and let them go. So feed your enemies and don't have vengeance on them. Relief from the enemy and the famine. You know the story, the city was they were basically going to starve to death. They were eating their own children. And he says, tomorrow you'll have more than enough. Trust in God. And they received their daily bread the next day. The death of Ben-Hadad and the rise of Hazael. God's power over the kings. He can put in kings and take them away. He can do whatever he likes to fulfill his plan and purpose. And the defeat of King Hazael of Damascus. It's not just kings, but also nations he can move and swap around. So with these miracles, and I don't quite agree with this list. because I think there's one more, and I think tonight's miracle that we're looking at, they've divided this into two. I think it's just really one. But you remember when Elisha has died and they have him buried, and there's a funeral going on and there's a raid, they chuck the body in on Elisha, and another person is raised from the dead. So he raises two people from the dead, one while he was alive and one when he was dead, which is quite an unusual thing. But I think that is probably should be on the bottom of this list, but it's not on this one. Okay, so for those who are familiar with the land of Israel, there's the Sea of Galilee up there. It's not showing up there. So we've got the Sea of Galilee, we've got Shunem there in the middle, and we've got Mount Carmel up there to the left. It's about 30 kilometres away up the, I think it's the Jezreel Valley that runs up there to Mount Hermon. And it's about 30 kilometres or so. So when she gets on her ass and she goes flat out, she's got to go 30 kilometres up there and 30 kilometres back. So it's quite a ride. Poor old donkey. Okay, the Shunammite woman. What do we find? We find that she's observant. She learns of Elisha's habits and his behaviour. She knows where he lives, where he's going to be. She knows that he's continually coming past his house. Like, remember last week, Jim said that it seems like Elisha went around on a circuit like Samuel did, and he went round and around, and she sees him go past, and she observes that this man of God keeps going past, and she's perceptive. She speaks to him, and you'll see this when we go through the chapter. She has him in for a meal, and then she says, I perceive that this is a man of God. So she weighs things up, and she is very perceptive. She's a very determined and persuasive person. She's powerful. She doesn't take no for an answer. She's a straight talker, and I think she's intimidating, because some of the things which come out of this story, people don't argue. They just do what she says. So I think she was quite a powerful woman who was quite intimidating. She's a woman of action. She perceives that he's a man of God, and she says, we need to build him a little room on the roof. So she puts things into action. She builds a room. She jumps on the donkey and she goes for a fast ride. When she's offered all these benefits, she says, no, I'm content to dwell with my people. She was with her people and she was content to be there. People who thought like her. She was happy to dwell with those people. We find that she's barren and that her husband is old. There should be some bells ringing from that scenario, which we'll look at. She was devout. She was a regular attender to the holy feasts. You'll see that by her husband's comments. She was faithful. Her son has died, and she says, it shall be well. And she closes the door and she's off. And that shall be well gets repeated over and over. She had no doubt whatsoever that things were going to be well. And they were not well when she was saying that. And it's interesting, and probably an illustration of her power, that Elisha follows her. He does what she tells him when he tried to fob her off. What about Elisha in this story? It seems a little odd because he seems to be worn out. If he is walking in a circuit, and I don't know how old he was, maybe he was older, and she says, we'll build a room for him to rest. So maybe he was older and he needed to have a bit of a rest. But this story, he seems to be laying around a lot. And when we say this, the city's name means a double resting place, I think that sort of plays into this part of it as well. He seems to be forever laying on the bed that she has there. He seems to keep his distance from the woman, so he always talks through Gehazi, which seems a little strange. I did wonder whether or not she didn't understand his language, and so he spoke through Gehazi. I thought about that. But then there's times where she speaks straight to him, and he knows what she's talking about. So I don't think it's a language barrier. I think there's something else being taught to us, that mediator is always being used between Elisha and the woman. Elisha seems a little out of touch with what her requirements are. He offers her favours that she has no interest in. So he seems a little remote from what's going on. He didn't even notice that she didn't have any children. And when he does say that you're going to have a child, he cops a bit of stick about, don't you lie to me. I mean, this is Elisha. This is a man who does incredible miracles. He just led a whole army and had a great success. And here's this woman telling him, do not lie to me. It's that's a pretty audacious thing to say to a very powerful man of God. She was quite a woman. When she comes all the way up to Shunem, to Mount Hermon, no, not Hermon, Carmel, Mount Carmel, he tries to fob her off and say, "Oh, here, Gehazi, take my stick and go and put it on the face of the boy, and all will be well." And she says, "No, we're not going anywhere until you come with us." And he follows her. So he sort of is trying to almost keep a bit of a distance from her, but she sorts him out. And when he gets there, he finally prays to God to raise the child, which doesn't seem to be mentioned in any of the other. When he tells her that she's going to have a child, God hides from him that she's lost it. There seems to be a bit of a gap between Elisha and God until the raising of that son, when he prays for that child, which seems a little, probably what I would have considered a little strange for the life of Elisha. When the child is raised, there's no thanks given to him. She takes the child and gone. It seems unnatural for that sort of thing to happen. And when the son receives his inheritance later on, Gehazi's there, but Elisha is not. So Elisha seems to play what I would have considered a bit of an odd role in this story from the Elisha that I've known in some of those other stories. So we'll see how we go. Okay, verse 8. It fell on a day. It's that that's repeated several times, that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman. Now, the word great, if you look up in the dictionary, in the Strongs, it says large. Now, I'm not sure whether she was a large woman. There's probably a few things which, as you'll see, make me think that maybe she was of a well-built nature. But she was definitely a very powerful woman. She was a great woman. Most commentators say that she was well-known, she was famous, she was successful. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what it's talking about. But there's one thing that sticks out later on, but we'll see. And she constrains him to eat bread. She twists his arm. He's not allowed to go until he's had something to eat. So she makes him have something to eat. And every time he comes past, he can't go past without stopping for something to eat. And she says to her husband, I perceive that this is a holy man of God. So she's talked with him. She's heard all of the things he's had to say, and she uses that to make a judgment that he is a holy man of God. And because of that, she's spurred into action. She says, let us make a little chamber on the wall. It actually means on the roof, and the chamber part means a roof room, which is sort of not something that we sort of know of. But if you remember, the building code that God set down was basically a square house, and on the roof there was a staircase on the outside, and there had to be a parapet around the roof. So you could go up there and have some time to yourself. You can pray. And there's examples of people using that. I mean, you've got Rahab, who had the flax laid out on the roof in the sun. So it was used as maybe a bit of a space. Technically, it was sort of designed for a place of prayer. And we know that David came to grief basically on the roof where he was supposed to be praying. So that kind of building is what we're talking about. And this roof room is a room that is built on top of that roof. So Elisha could come along, he could go up his stairs and he could go into his chamber or to his roof room. And it's separate from the rest of the living part of the house. And it fell on a day that he came thither and turned into the chamber, and he had a lay down. And he says to Gehazi, his servant, call this Shunammite. And when he called her, she stood before him. So she comes out the stairs and she stands there where Elisha is. And he says he said unto Gehazi, say now unto her, behold, thou hast been careful for us for all this care. What is to be done for thee? Would thou be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the host? And she says, no, I'm happy where I am. I am happy with the people that I deal with. I'm happy to dwell among my own people. She was content to be with the people who thought like her. And we know that God calls Israel, natural and spiritual, his own people. And in the end, his desire is to dwell with us. The same as this woman here is happy to dwell with her own people. And Gehazi, he never gets painted in a very good picture. But he's much more perceptive than Elisha. And he says, oh, she's got no child and her husband's old. So he's worked out what is missing and what her desire would be. She didn't want the king's favor. She didn't want the looking after by the army. She wanted a child. And Gehazi works that out. So Elisha calls her back again. And when she called her, she stood in the door. And he says, about this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thy handmaid. That's a pretty brisk response to such a good news. And the scenario that we have painted here takes us back to Genesis chapter 18, where it says, and he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door. It's a very similar scenario here. Someone standing in the door listening, and this promise of a son is given according to the time of life. So this is a promised seed. We know that the one in Genesis was Isaac, but really it was talking about Christ, that promised seed that was to come. And here we have a very similar scenario happening again. And the woman conceived and bare a son, according to what she was told. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day, and he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said, my head, my head. And his father says to a lad that was nearby, he says, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him, he brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees till noon and then died. So a pretty sad scenario, really. This child is obviously old enough to be out and about, maybe 6 or 7, maybe something like that, 5 or 6 or 7, something like that. And he's out there, and he gets brought home, and he dies. And there's no record of the mother's being distraught, losing the plot. There's none of that. It's very quiet. We know in a few verses later on where it says that her soul is vexed. So she was She obviously was bothered by what happens, but in the record, she just goes into action. The child dies, and she went up the stairs, and she lays the boy out on Elisha's bed. So now it's the boy's turn to lay on the bed, and she shuts the door. And this is a passage which reminds me really of the sepulchre where Christ was laid. He was laid out in the sepulchre and the door was shut. The stone was rolled over, and she then goes out. She puts the boy there, she closes the door, and she goes. And she says to her husband, "Send, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again." It's 12 o'clock. It's the middle of the day. And remember we said it was like 30 kilometres, so she had to then ride a donkey 30 kilometres from Shunem to Mount Carmel and back. So that's a pretty hefty undertaking before nightfall. But there's no time frames given, but you would expect it to be within that sort of time frame. But so it was a pretty audacious ride and a coming back to the house. And the husband says to her, what are you going today for? Why do you go to him today? It's neither new moon nor Sabbath. So in other words, he was used to her going to the feasts of the new moon, the feasts of the Sabbaths, and keeping all of those things. He was used to her doing that. And he's going, well, it's not one of them today. Well, what are you up to? And all she says is, "It shall be well." Her son has just died. She doesn't say anything to anybody else. And she just says, "It will be well." That's quite an incredible response in the circumstances, naturally. It's almost unnatural. But her confidence in Elisha being able to do something about the problem is rock solid. She says, "It will be well." So she saddled the ass and she says to the servant, "Drive and go as fast as you can. And unless I tell you to slow down, go as fast as you can." So you can imagine it would have been a fairly rough and quick ride up through that valley to go and find Elisha. It's interesting that she doesn't go left, right, or look around for him. She just goes straight to Elisha. There's no question about where he is, and she knows where he will be. And this is the interesting part, because as she gets close to Mount Carmel, the man of God saw her afar off. So he sees someone coming a long way away. And he says to Gehazi, his servant, "Behold yonder, it's that Shunammite." It's like, so from a long way away, somehow or other, he's worked out who it is. And in the next slide, we've got the comment that Elisha says, "God has hidden this from me." Elisha didn't know that the child had died, the woman was coming. He knew none of those things. So there was something about her coming towards him that he could pick who it was. And that's probably why I think maybe she was of a well-built nature, maybe. I don't know. There's something that made him know who she was. And it made me think of chapter 9, where the watchmen are on the city wall and they're watching and they can see a chariot coming. And they send people out to meet the chariot and they don't come back. And they go, we know who that is. That's Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously. So there was something about Jehu which they knew. He drove furiously, so they could see it and they knew who it was. So what was it that Elisha could see with the Shunammite woman that made him know who she was? An interesting thought. And Elisha says to Gehazi, "Run to meet her," which is very similar to the chapter 9 dispatch of people out to who's the ones that are coming. He says, "Go out and meet her and say unto her, Is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child?" And she answered, "It's well." which seems really, one, it's odd that he should ask such a question 3 times. And it's odd that she would say, yep, it's all fine. So, in other words, she didn't want to deal with Gehazi. She wanted to deal with Elisha. And when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. And we know Matthew chapter 28, verse 9, at the resurrection of Christ, the women meet him, and they held him by the feet and they worshipped him. It was a behaviour which showed honour to the person. And here she does it. She catches him by the feet, and Gehazi comes to try and tell her to get away. And the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her. So she was bothered by what happened. And he says, Yahweh hath hid this from me and hath not told me. He still doesn't know what the problem is. And she says, Did I ask of for a son of my Lord? Did I ask for one? Did I not say, do not deceive me? So she's got in her mind very much the remembering the do not lie to me. It's coming back and she's reusing it again. And here Elisha gives Gehazi the staff and says, here, take this and go and put it on the face of the child. I thought that Elisha is older because in this part of the story, Gehazi gets there way before him. So obviously Elisha is not traveling as fast as Gehazi can. So maybe he's older. And he sort of tries to fob it off by saying, oh, Gehazi, you take the stick and you go and you fix the problem. But the woman says, as Yahweh liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. No arguing, no questions. Why was that? These words are the same words that he himself used to Elijah. When Elijah was going to be taken by God and he knew about it, Elijah says to Elisha, go home. I've just got to go to Jericho or whatever it was. Like, I've got to go a bit of a journey. Go home. He goes, no. As Yahweh liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he says it 3 times. The only witness to that conversation was God. There was probably some prophets up on the cliffs watching what was going on because they saw him go. So there was people watching, but there was obviously not someone next to him and overhearing this. So these words that she uses can only have come from God. God was the only one that would have heard those things and exactly what he said. And when he hears that, he gets up and he follows her. He does what she says. So Gehazi goes off quickly and he gets there. He does what he's told. He puts the staff on the child and he doesn't hear a voice. There's no hearing. The kid can't hear him calling him, nothing. And so he goes back out of the house and he comes to Elisha and he says, kid's not woken up. And when Elisha gets there and he comes into the house, and behold, the child was dead and it was laid upon his bed. So the child is stretched out on Elisha's bed. And he goes into that room and he closes the door on the two of them, the boy and him, and he prays to Yahweh. And this is really the first time this is mentioned, that he prays to Yahweh to do this miracle. Or even the promising of a child to come earlier. It's almost recorded as an off-the-cuff sort of comment. There's no prayer or anything like that. It says bang, bang, bang. Whereas here, there's a definite effort being put in. And he goes in and he lays upon the child, and he put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands, and he stretches himself upon the child, and the flesh waxed warm. So this is quite an unusual miracle. I mean, you think of all the other times people are raised. There's Lazarus come forth or whatever. There's verbal type of things, but this is like a physical touch to illustrate this. And it's we said this is a bit like a sepulchre, this room, where Elisha lives, and now this child is there and he's dead, and he lays himself upon this child, and the child only gets warm. He then returns down into the house and he walks to and fro, which is an odd sort of phrase. It's a common phrase throughout the Bible, walking to and fro. When you think about some of those to and fros, a bad one is in Job, where the adversary says, "Oh, where have you been?" He goes, "Oh, I've been to and fro here and there," like a bit of a loose end. But he's observing, because he's the one that's saying, "Oh, Job's got all this stuff. You should touch it." And I bet he's not as good. So he's observing what's going on. Also in Revelation, you've got the angel who is to and fro in the ecclesias, and he's watching and he's looking. So he's observant. So here we have Elisha wandering the house, and he's observant. He's looking. He's going to and fro, looking around this house. He goes back up into the room, and he stretches himself upon the child again, and the child sneezes 7 times. An unusual reference in Scripture to a sneezing. The 7 obviously is complete. It's also the number of covenant. So here we have a resurrection with a covenant involved as well, and the child opens his eyes. So quite a strange reference to a resurrection. There is comments about the stretching himself being like a crucifixion, like so the hands, the eyes, the mouth, and the hands being like laid out like a crucifixion. There's references to that kind of thing. There's also in Jewish history or tradition that they say, and how they get it, I don't know, but they're saying that when Adam was created and God breathed into him, he sneezed as part of that coming to life part. That's a Jewish tradition, wherever that comes from, I don't know. But so this sneezing is described as if you're going to sneeze, what do? You breathe in first. It's a deep breath before you sneeze out. So that deep breath part is really what is being referred to in this sneezing. So maybe when Adam breathed in that thing, it sort of was like a sneeze almost. But here we have this child sneezes 7 times, and he opens his eyes. He's still there on the bed, and he opens his eyes. And he calls Gehazi, and he says, "Call the Shunammite." So he called her, and when she was come up unto him, he said, "Take up thy son." And she went in, fell at his feet again, and bowed herself to the ground. And then she takes up her son, and she goes out. There's no comment. She doesn't say anything. She makes actions. She falls at his feet, which is a worship gesture. But there's no comment, and she's gone, which is quite odd, really, when you think about it. So that finishes that chapter 4 record. So the promise of the child, the birth, the death, the resurrection, and then time goes on. And obviously Elisha kept doing his circuits, and he would come through past her house at times. In chapter 8, a little time later on, speaks to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, "Arise and go thou and thy household, and sojourn wheresoever thou canst sojourn, for Yahweh hath called for a famine, and it shall so also come upon the land 7 years." And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. This is a woman who said, I'm happy to dwell with my own people. And now she's being told to go somewhere else. So she wouldn't be, obviously, she's not going to be happy about going somewhere else, but she does exactly what she's told. The man of God tells her, and she goes. And she goes and lives with the Philistines. So it's like going and living with the Gentiles for a period of time. And like I said, I think the woman loosely represents the saints and with her faithfulness and all of those other things. And here she is living with the Gentiles for an extended period of time. 7 again means complete. It can also mean a covenant as well. So these are people under a covenant. And it comes to pass at the end of that period of time that she returns out of the land of the Philistines, only to find that her house and her property had been confiscated, whether it was by the king or whether it was by others, I don't know. But she's lost the title to her property. And it was not really probably her concern about the property. It's more about the son's inheritance. It was the family's legacy that needed to be restored. And while she finds this out, and she then goes up to the king to appeal to the king for a ruling on this problem, at the same time, Gehazi, the one that always gets the bad rap, he's having a good chinwag with the king. And the king says to the servant of the man of God, saying, tell me, I pray, that all the great things that Elisha hath done. So the king wants to know all of these miracles that the man of God has done over that period of time. And Gehazi seems to be very keen to tell a few stories to the king. And as he was telling the king about how Elisha restored a dead body to life, that behold, the very woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi is quite surprised. He goes, my lord the king, this is the woman and this is her son whom Elisha raised to life. He goes, she's right here. And when the king asked the woman, she told him she told him that it was true, that that's what was happening. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer. Remember when Elisha said, what favour can we do for her? She's built us this little room that we can stay in. What can we do for her? I can speak nicely to the king so that the king, will look after you. We can speak to the captain of the host, the chief of the army to protect you. What do you want? And she said, no, I'm fine. I don't need any of that. But here she's appealing to the king, and now the king is offering her a certain officer, someone who has authority to go and restore the things which she had lost. And that restoration is something that appears in this story. And she receives all of the fruits of the field since the day that she left the land until now. So she left because of a famine, but now she's getting her land back, and she's being told, the certain officer is being told, well, you restore to her all of the things that she didn't get while she was away, which seems an odd thing for someone to do after a famine. And I don't know of any other reference in this story to a famine on the land at the time. So it seems a little odd that she went away because of a famine, but maybe there wasn't such a famine. It seems a little odd in the mix of the story. And she's given back all of the fruit of the field in that time, which seems a little strange. Not so much Elisha, but Elijah is associated also with restoration of things. In Matthew 17, Jesus answered and said unto them, Elijah truly shall come first and restore all things. And he was talking about John the Baptist in preparing the way for for Christ and the restoring of all of the things which Christ put in place. We also know that prophetically, Elijah has a role to play in establishing the kingdom in the time to come as well, to restore this world to the kingdom of Israel and to the throne of David. So there's restoration being made in the time to come by Elijah, and you can imagine Elisha being with him in that work as well, the two of them together in restoring all things. So what do we learn from the great Shunammite woman? We learned that she was observant. She learns Elisha's habits and behavior. She knows where he is, where he's going, what he says. She digests them, she thinks about them, and she makes that perceptive judgment that he is a holy man of God. And for us, we need to read the Holy Scriptures and make those same perceptive decisions as well. Christ asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? Thou art the Christ, the Holy One of God. You know, that kind of perceptive judgment that is made by the disciples is something that we need to do as well by reading the records of the gospel records about Christ and the prophecies which talk about him. They're the things which will make us be perceptive as well. I think she's a very determined and persuasive woman. She's very powerful. She doesn't take no for an answer, even from a powerful and influential man like Elisha. She's a straight talker. She says, she doesn't beat around the bush. She just says what she wants. And I feel that Elisha is almost intimidated by her behavior and her confidence and her directiveness of what happens in this story. We can do the same things in prayer. In an exhort I did a few weeks ago on Isaiah 62, it says, "Do not give God silence about fulfilling his promises." It's persuasive prayer. It's consistent. It says, do not give him silence ever. Just continually over and over and over. And that same idea of appealing for reminding God that he's made promises and that he needs to fulfill them. That's what that chapter is about. And here we have a woman who is determined. She's persuasive. She's powerful. She never takes no for an answer, and she continues on with her powerful character and her mission. Her faith drives her to do good works. She builds the room for Elisha on the roof. She gets on with things, and her faith drives her to do things which are a little unusual, or a little outside the square. Riding the donkey quickly, the 30 kilometers and back, was not an easy task, but it was something that her faith, it shall be well, she puts into action, and she goes. She was content to dwell with her people. And we know that godliness with contentment is great gain. She didn't want any of the big flash favors of the king or of the army or any of those other things. She wanted to dwell with her people, the people who thought like her, who had the same mindset. And we know that godliness with contentment is great gain. If we are content with our lot in life and with God's ruling over the things which we do, then that is deemed great gain. She was barren and she was old. Another example of all things are possible with God. God can work miracles which seem crazy, which don't seem possible, but God can do all things. We need to trust him with his directive that he gives to our lives. She was devout. She was a regular attender to the holy feasts. She would normally have been at those things as per her husband's comments. So dwelling within the ecclesia and being involved in those things. The people who have a like mind with us, they are things which this woman obviously did, and it's a lesson that we can learn from as well. Her faith was outstanding in this record. For someone to be promised a son, to lose them, to have them resurrected, and all through that, to know that it shall be well. God was in control, and it shall be well. That was quite a declaration of her faith. And our confidence in God's care and our salvation through his only Son who was raised from the dead. That's where our faith lies, through the salvation that Christ has brought to us, the Son that was raised from the dead. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brother Nigel, for your words tonight and outlining the character of the woman of Shunem and the lessons that we can take from that. Appreciate it. In regards to announcements for next week, our brother Mick Lyons is down to continue the study of the miracles of Elisha, looking at the woman and the oil. Brother Marty is scheduled to preside, and Sister Amy Lund down for supper. If you'll all rise, we'll just say a prayer. Great and glorious Heavenly Father, Thou who hast blessed us once again with this quiet time, you've answered our prayers and allowed us to gather here, allowed us to learn and to open your word, and we're thankful for it. We're thankful that we now have this time, that we can have fellowship together, that we can have these relationships strengthened through your word, to grow with each other and to develop them together. We ask that we might be able to enjoy the time together tonight, and also to strive to strengthen those relationships with our brethren and sisters each Sunday and each day, and all those that we come into contact with. Great God, we've been reminded of the characteristics of that great woman, for she had faith in you, and she knew that the prophet Elisha had the ability to help in the time of need. So may we also display that same faith, find ways to trust in you, and to also remind you constantly through prayer that we know there are promises that are to come, that we can be a part of. We pray and ask for those promises to be fulfilled, for that day of your Son's return to come soon, that we may all be able to find a place in that kingdom. Guide us throughout the remainder of this night, and as we travel home, we thank thee also now for the blessing of this supper, to come to thee through thy Son's name, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.